So that was my introduction to to the US in Washington, D.C. And so I took my flight to Savanna, and I landed. Eric was there. It was night. It was about 8:30 p.m. Freezing cold. It was snowflaking. That was a first for me as well. I had never experienced that kind of cold in my life. My ears were frozen, frostbitten, my nose. But I had 2 weeks before school actually started, so I just spent 2 weeks hanging out with Eric and looking around Savanna before I enrolled in school.
Tell us a little bit about Savanna. Where is Savanna the area?
Yeah.
Okay.
Savannah, Georgia is in southern Georgia, at the coast, near the coast, I should say, about a half-hour drive from Tybee Beach. Very historic town. I believe it's the second oldest urban settlement in the North Americas after Boston. So Boston is where the Pilgrims landed, leaving the oppression of the crown in England to go establish a new settlement. Savannah was the second. Was also a very important slave trading depot. Most of the slave trading ships from Africa would dock at Savannah. From the Caribbean, through the Caribbean to Savannah. So Savannah has that legacy. It's a very well-known town for slave trade. In fact, one of the things Savannah is famous for is the underground catacombs and paths and tunnels which connected a lot of the big mansions in downtown Savannah, because the slaves were never to be seen above ground, so they would be moved underground to their masters' quarters from the river where the boats docked. It's a very interesting city today, very affluent. I don't think you can buy anything for less than $1 million in Savannah today. But that's where Savannah College of Art and Design established itself in the 70s, 1978 or 77, I believe.
When you're saying you can't buy anything for, are you talking about real estate?
Yes, real estate. Very expensive. It's gone through a massive gentrification. Amazing place to study the building arts, architecture, urban design, historic preservation, especially because of the history in Savannah. I mean, it's the second oldest master planned settlement in America. That tells you a lot, with the old cobblestone streets that still exist. Lots of history. Jingle Bells, for instance, was composed in Savannah. Strangely enough, there's actually a memorial to the author of Jingle Bells in Savannah. Had one of the most notable things for me from a master planning perspective, since we're talking about architecture, was one of the first settlements where they made space for public gatherings. So after every few sort of houses, they would create squares, which are gardens. So they're like squareabouts or roundabouts. So you drive around them, so that you have parks and green spaces for people living and doing business around there to enjoy nature and the neighborhood. Very organized. I loved it because I love order. I mean, and given that they created this order in the 1800s, 1700s, it's insane. So amazing atmosphere for studying. 60% of the students were international, so I got to interact with people from all sorts of walks of life.
Dude, you're exciting me about this phase we're about to enter. Okay, so now in January you join. Tell us a little. Savannah.
Savannah is in Georgia.
No. Tell us the name of the
Savannah College of Art and Design. SCAD for short.
SCAD. Tell us a little bit about SCAD, because it sounds like it's got a lot of. It's for that kind of history. This sounds like a very serious school, college, tertiary institution for this study. For the arts. So I didn't know at the time when I accepted the invitation, because remember, my primary considerations: one, do they offer architecture? Number two, my cousin Eric is in Savannah, so that's the one I'm going to, as opposed to the other two that accepted me. Right? Others that have ended up elsewhere. But I learned as soon as I got there
SCAD was actually one of, I think, only 3 institutions on the planet accredited to issue a 5-year master's program in architecture.
Yo.
So normally when you study architecture, you do 5 years for a bachelor's degree,
Then 2.
then you intern for 2 years, then you come back for 2 years to get a master's degree.
What?
So you're looking at 9 years before you get a master's. But Savanna, as soon as you enrolled, if you finish 5 years, you leave with a master's degree.
What?
That tells you a lot in a nutshell about the unique curriculum, the intensity of it. Amazing institution. I mean, anyone interested in the arts, whether it's fashion design, interior design, graphic design, product design, film, animation, 3D design, historic preservation, name it. That's like the Harvard for the arts, in as far as I'm concerned. And so for that reason, it was a rich experience. I didn't know going that that's what I was experiencing, and I loved it there. I mean,
okay, let's talk about it from the beginning now. You joining, first of all, for you to go at this time, did you have to have paid 100% fees?
No, you simply had to demonstrate that you had enough fees to cover the first year of tuition. Yeah, which my parents did. I believe, as was a practice back then, with the help of friends, you load an account with enough chums, you present bank statements, and that's one of the things they assess when you're applying for a visa.
Okay, so but did you have to pay the school a certain percentage of school fees before joining?
So the first quarter you have to pay it before you get there, which we did.
Okay. And when do you start now? Do you join in January, of course?
January, like first week of January.
And now you're joining with another bunch of people who are also starting this first semester.
Yes, so that was the other interesting. Even though the academic year began in September the previous year, there are many people enrolling every quarter to join the earlier students.
Yeah, because countries have different
systems.
Systems, yeah.
And then also because of the nature of the curriculum at SCAD, for instance, one of my earlier friends, Dutch or Belgian gentleman called Ben de Vlieshauer, a very interesting guy, was already a working professional in Belgium. He was a photographer and film guy. He enrolled at SCAD for 2 quarters only to add to his professional skills. And then he went back to Belgium. So he wasn't there doing a degree like the rest of us.
Yes.
Which you could do, which you still can do today. So, I mean, it was a very interesting environment to study.
Okay, let's walk this slowly. And again, because I'm thinking of somebody who may be watching this and is flying abroad for the first time for the exact same thing, for schooling.
Yeah.
So you start now. So now you're one link. So first and foremost, what was a soft landing for you was the fact that you had your cousin who enabled you.
My cousin was there. He had his own place.
Yeah.
I wasn't spending money on hotels and things.
Oh, nice.
He could show me where to buy clothes.
That's because your wardrobe is useless.
It's winter. My goodness, I would have died of cold.
I like what you're saying, because even what we think we wear here when it's warm, when it's cold, is absolutely useless.
Kabisa.
For that environment.
Well, you're talking about minus something degrees centigrade.
Oh, minus. That's when it changes.
Plus, you throw in wind chill factor, which is why people get frostbite. Because, if it's 4 degrees centigrade and then there's a breeze, even though the temperature is 4 degrees centigrade, to you it feels like minus 10 because of that breeze.
Yep.
And then people get frostbitten, the skin dries and cracks up from the cold. You get deathly ill if you're not properly dressed, or living in places that are not sufficiently heated either. I mean, in these countries, it's commonplace, especially in impoverished neighborhoods where people can't afford the heating bills, where they find, especially the elderly, have died during winter, or the opposite during summer. They can't afford the AC because of utility bills. So I mean, the extremes are harsh, especially if you're coming from a place like Kenya,
Yeah,
where we enjoy amazing weather 24 hours a day,
Yeah.
all year.
Yeah.
Stuff you take for granted, it can be a shock.
So, man, I'm understanding the soft landing was also an educational landing, because now he was able to advise you about something like the weather.
Yeah, whether which bank to open an account, because I went with all these. Remember, we used to travel with travelers' checks for safety. I had to deposit my travelers' checks for school fees. He helped me open a bank account, took me to the bank, open an account. Took less than 30 minutes with a student ID. That's all I needed. So he oriented me really well.
Okay.
Yeah.
And now tell me about the orientation from the school.
From
so you
school,
arrive,
I mean,
he tells you, Koheri, bye-bye.
Yeah, he drops me off. I mean, he lived not too far off, so I knew I'd see him after a few days, which was comforting.
And you were moving to residentials within the campus?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I stayed in the dorms. They call them dorms, or more like hotel rooms. Literally, they were like rooms like this, just fitted out for student housing. Savanna College of Art and Design was famous for repurposing buildings all over this old city. I think today they own most of the buildings in downtown Savanna, non-residential buildings especially. It was amazing. Then they introduce you to all the new students. You have a number of orientation exercises, signing up for classes.
So this is the first time you're meeting students from across the world. So now I'm even hearing some of your friends are of different races. Throughout this whole alliance and KJ,
boss, nothing. This is a whole new ball
so just
game.
know this.
Yeah, I mean, to go from a place where all you see is a beautiful African skin, to a place where you're the minority, is also a bit of a shock. But I will say Kenyans struggle very little with that for some reason. I think maybe it's a natural result of all the media we've consumed since we were children. We're not as affected as other people. In fact, we welcome the interaction with the new cultures.
It is true.
We're already familiar. We slip right into the culture. We speak, in many cases, better English than they do, because we learned it from the Queen herself. So I mean, it was interesting. Very rich experience for me.
Okay, so can you remember who you gravitated to in terms of friendships, the circle that you...
Yeah, I mean, immediately I was introduced to the African students. There was an association.
Were there other Kenyans there?
Yes, quite a number, actually. I think, random count, there was at least 10 Kenyans students.
Okay.
Some were my age. Others were older. Some had been there for like 3-4 years before I arrived. And they were very welcoming. So Kenyan bashes on weekends, nyama choma. In some instances, we'd have to slaughter goats in the bathroom, in the bathtub, because it's illegal to slaughter animals unless you're licensed to do so. It was interesting. But majority were not even American, were international students from elsewhere. Yeah, Chinese, Japanese. I had Japanese roommates. I had.
So who were your first roommates? So did you even have roommates, or at the beginning you lived alone?
I had my first roommate was, I forget his name now. He was an African American, although he looked Hispanic. Very yellow skin and Hispanic looking, dark hair, but he was actually African American. I asked him once after a while, because I was confused about his classification as an African American. Because he talked like one, he culturally he was African American, but he looked like a half-caste appointee with, short. He used to keep his hair very short. This guy was actually a very successful attorney. For years, he worked for Johnny Cochran. Remember Johnny Cochran? Famous OJ lawyer, P. Diddy's lawyer. He worked in Johnny Cochran's law firm for years. And then one day just decided this was not his passion. He wanted to learn how to do animation. So he quit and went back to school. And I was his first roommate. We were each other's first roommate. Very interesting guy. I remember asking him, how are you African American, but you look almost white? It's like, well, it's a bit complicated, but my great-great-grandmother was a house slave. And so her job was to give birth to new house slaves for her slave master. That's why I look mixed, because I am mixed. Yeah. So that was my introduction to this murky history between the Americas and Africa. And I started to appreciate the differences between them and us and the horrors they went through, which, granted, we went through our own horrors here in Africa, but
we have identity.
Yes, we have identity, and there's more of us, in the same place. We have our own issues, but I can't even begin to imagine some of the legacy problems and traumas these our brothers who got transported to these new continents suffered. So it was a nice guy, lived out of his car, literally sold all his possessions and had everything in the trunk of his car at all times. So when he left school, he would go stay with his mom in Atlanta and come back to school. I mean, it was interesting. So that was my first roommate.
And how is school now? Okay, from an educational perspective now, what is the learning like? You've talked about actually, just hold on one sec.